There is a purchase you have made that had nothing to do with the product. You told yourself it did. You built a rational case for it. It is a deeply ancient psychological system operating inside your modern financial decisions without your permission.
Status spending never presents itself as status spending. As taste.
Almost nobody identifies it while it is happening. Once you can see this pattern operating in real-time, you will never be able to unsee it. By the time you notice the pattern, it has been compounding against your financial position for years.
Not to make you feel guilty about purchases you have already made, but because that visibility is worth more than any budgeting system anyone has ever sold you.
Once you can see this pattern operating in real-time, you will never be able to unsee it. For most of human evolutionary history, your position in the social hierarchy was one of the most consequential facts about your life. The brain learned, over hundreds of thousands of years, to treat status maintenance as a survivority.
The drive to signal and protect your status is not coming from the rational part of your brain. It is fact. It has no idea that you are living in a world where the threat of low status no longer means you will be expelled from the tribe.
When an opportunity arises to signal status, the system activates. It generates desire, which it does, reliably, every time. Not weakness, not stupidity. Ancient software running on modern hardware, in a world it was never designed for. Status spending does not require an actual audience. The audience for most status spending is imaginary, a composite, a mental construction, built from your social environment, your aspirations, and your fears about how you are perceived. Real people in your life notice your new car for approximately 4 seconds before returning to their own concerns. Every purchase that satisfies the imaginary audience temporarily raises the baseline of what they expect next. The car that felt like an upgrade becomes simply what you drive. Its function is not to be satisfied. Its function is to keep you spending.
This is not a cycle you can win by spending more. The mechanism does not have a winning condition. It has only a more expensive treadmill.
This is the architecture of status spending. Now you can see it operating. And that visibility changes everything.
For most of human history, you compared yourself to the people you could actually see. Your village.
Economists call it relative deprivation. It is not about what you have. It is about what you have relative to the people you compare yourself to.
Social media and modern media have destroyed that boundary completely.
Not your actual peers. The peak performers from a global sample of millions. The most successful, most apparently wealthy people in your demographic. Your brain processes the Instagram feed of someone 3 income levels above you the same way it would process seeing your neighbor's new car, as relevant data about where you stand. As a signal that your status is at risk. As a trigger for the spending response. People are now running a status comparison engine calibrated to inputs that would have been completely inaccessible to any previous generation. Not because they are weak, because the system they are running was never designed for this volume of status threat information. Between 30 and 40% of discretionary spending in middle and upper middle income households is driven primarily by status signaling rather than functional utility. It shows up in car choices, neighborhood choices, restaurant choices, clothing choices, technology choices. For someone earning $80,000 a year, that is somewhere between $12,000 and $18,000 annually flowing toward an imaginary audience that will never be satisfied. Over a decade, that is $120,000 to $180,000. Compounded as invested capital instead of spent on status, over 30 years, that number becomes something that would fundamentally, not because you were extravagant, because you were normal, because you were running the same psychological software that everyone around you is running. The difference between people who build real wealth and people who perform wealth is not usually income. It is the percentage of their spending. That is what routing around the mechanism buys you. Not a number, a fundamentally different architecture.
The wealthy people who actually have assets to match their lifestyle learned, at some point, to see the mechanism, and then to route around it.
You now know what the upgrade is actually buying. That visibility changes the decision. The performance of wealth and the accumulation of wealth are not just different things.
They are in direct competition with each other. The performance of wealth is visible, celebrated, socially rewarded. The accumulation of wealth is invisible. Nobody asks about your index fund balance. Nobody notices your savings rate. But they notice the watch. They notice the restaurant choice. The social reward system is precisely inverted from the financial reward system. What gets you status in the room is what keeps you poor over time. Status signals must be costly to be credible. If anyone could afford the signal, it would carry no status information. For purchases that stretch you. Because only then does the signal communicate that you have resources to spare. People spending money they do not have to signal wealth they do not possess to people who are not paying as much attention as they imagine. Running financially backwards. At full speed. With a smile. The difference is not income. It is whether you can see the mechanism and choose to route around it. Now you can see the full architecture, the performance, the inversion. That question is the crack in the architecture. Because once you ask it honestly, you cannot fully restore the previous certainty.
It usually happens when you are alone, in a quiet moment where the imaginary audience is not present, and you are looking at a purchase you made.
You begin to see the pattern operating in real time. You notice the desire to upgrade when someone acquires something. You notice the relief that comes from a purchase that reestablishes your position. You notice that the relief lasts approximately
A small moment between the impulse and the action, where a different question can be asked.
Is this purchase building something, or is it performing something? That question, asked consistently over time,
Redirecting impulse after impulse, this is what it actually builds.
because the framework cannot override the impulse. But the question can redirect it. One question, asked honestly, worth more than any framework anyone has ever designed.
You are running ancient status software in a modern financial environment. The software was designed to protect you in a world where status determines survival. It is now operating in a world where status signals are everywhere. Comparison groups are global. Most people are spending a significant fraction of their financial resources every year for their entire working lives. Status spending has one financial outcome. It keeps you performing wealth while preventing you from building it. The people who break this pattern do not become ascetics. They become precise, very clear about which spending produces actual.
They call it taste. They call it quality. They call it living well. Sometimes it is those things.
And they stop funding the audience. Not all at once, not perfectly, not without backsliding, but to let actual assets accumulate while the performance budget stays flat. To build the thing that the performance was always pretending to signal. Real wealth is quiet. Real wealth is quiet. It does not need an audience. That is how you know it is real.